there. Here we are. Hey, so we are gonna review the Tasklister Lite mini project there. My intention for this is just to kind of run through it. I won't go too fast, but I won't dawdle over basics. That being said, anytime anyone at all has any questions about anything we're doing or needs clarification or I'm not explaining stuff clearly, feel free to stop me anytime. You can raise your hand if you want. It's likely I won't see it, so just go ahead and say what you want. Just say, hey, stop there, and I'll stop and we'll talk about stuff. And that's pretty much how I operate in general. So yeah, anytime, any questions, anything, yeah, please. Cool. Before we jump into it, is there anything we want to talk about first or ask about, or anything you'd like me to focus on while we're doing it, I guess?
I think the general consensus is that we're, for the most part, have like the basic what it's asking to do ready to go. We kind of rolled through all that with Eeks in the lecture.
Awesome.
So I think what we want is like a walkthrough of all the extra steps that are in like the README, the like extra deliverables.
Cool.
Is where we're struggling.
Sweet. So I'll kind of blast through the first part, and then we'll get it as we get it. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully everything is good for that. Share screen. There we go. It's my lovely, what is it? Old, not, what's the desert name that this one is? I don't know. A super old version because I'm terrified of upgrading my work machine to Monterey, because I upgraded my personal machine to Monterey, and it was a process, let me tell you. Cool. So this is the project. I actually not a fan of Canvas, so I just go ahead and grab it from GitHub, grab the code, and I've got a repo directory where all my stuff is. Oh, those are all old. Cool. I'm just going to clone this down, git clone. So I'm just making a copy of that in here. Great, perfect, done. If I go into that, there's all my stuff, and I'm just going to code it up. And then we can quit terminal because everything we need is going to be in there. Awesome. Cool. So let's start off by looking at the README, right? To-do list application. Great. So we did all that stuff. Open index HTML in Chrome. Question for y'all, I guess. Where's your faces? There they are. Bring those over here. I can see them. Question for y'all: when you're doing stuff like this, are you just opening the file like it says here in Chrome, or are you using a little Lite server or anything? Does anyone show you how to do that? Awesome, new stuff. Cool. So when I'm working here, I pretty much use the terminal in here. So I do control backtick. That opens up our little terminal here. You can also Command Shift P to bring up the command palette, I guess. And do terminal from there. But right now, oops, I don't want to do that. Just have a terminal in here, and this is opening in the directory that we're working in. I like to use, there's a bunch of different ways to handle a server. I know that live server is built into VS Code now. I've had varying luck with that, and sometimes I'm set in my way. So I like to use a package called Lite server, Lite server. You can either install that with npm install global. That will give you access to that command anywhere, or you can do npx, and that should just run it from npm. I already have it installed. And I can see where it lives by saying which Lite server, it lives in my npm directory. Great. So I can just pop open Lite server, and it will take the current directory and treat it as a basic web server. And there we go. The cool thing about this is when you change stuff, it'll automatically reload it. It'll do a hot load. So for example, if I change the index HTML and put too many E's here, it magically does that. The other thing I have set up for, for a fast cycle, I guess, I've seen so many people struggle with trying to figure out how to solve a problem, and nothing's working, and it turns out that they didn't save their file. Some people have spent too much time on that. So in preferences, you can go in preferences, great, and set autosave, and I set it to, where is it? Maybe it's in a different settings. You can also command that. I usually set it to save on focus change. So anytime I switch windows or even go down to the terminal, automatically saves my stuff. And so that lets me make mistakes really fast and see them really quickly and fix them quicker. So faster you can make mistakes, the faster you're gonna be, because 90% of coding is making mistakes and fixing them, I think. Cool, so that's just my basic setup. Don't care about that. Cool, so making our stuff. So we have an index file that's hooked up to our JavaScript with script tag, and we can see that there. So I believe our content still reflects this. This is a fine way to do it. You've looked at event listeners already, and one of the event listeners that you probably see in every lab to this point is adding a DOM content loaded listener on a document. And that is an event that the document fires off that says, hey, I've loaded all of the HTML, parsed it, and turned it into DOM elements and put them on the page. Now you can do your JavaScript. And that lets us do things like selectors and all that without having to worry about it. This is great. This totally works. I've done this for a long time. And it's also a good way to start getting used to events. Here in the future, we don't use this anymore. When we are linking our, where is it? Okay, first of all, we don't put that in the footer anymore. Top tip, option up and down arrow will move lines around so you don't have to copy and paste them. If you put your script tag here and say defer, this is something that's supported in pretty much every browser that I know of these days, and it does the exact same thing as the DOM content loaded thing. Basically says don't load this file until the rest of the page is loaded. And it's not only for script tags. You can do it with anything, but script tags are where we find it the most useful. So if you are sick and tired of typing document add event listener, DOM content loaded, and so on, and cluttering your code with an extra function, we don't need to do that anymore. Just put defer in your script tag and everything should be okay. That being said, let's see and make sure that our our script is working. The first thing I almost always do when starting is putting a console log in my JavaScript file, because again, some people have spent way too much time trying to debug their code in a file that is not loading. So just to make sure that my file loads, here it is. So I know my JavaScript is running. Great, good time. And I can get rid of that. So what are we actually doing here? Let's see. We want to be able to type a task into the input field, click a submit button, and see the task string provided there. Great. So since most people seem to have this down, I'm going to roll through it really quickly. If you are not one of the people that has it down, please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions about what I'm doing. And I might do things a little bit differently than what you have been shown or what you might have been trying to do. If what I'm doing looks unfamiliar, again, stop me and ask me, and I'll happy to stop anytime and see what we got. So, type a task into the input field. Hey, already done. Great, did it. Click some sort of submit button. Hey, we can click that button. Great. Doesn't do anything though. In fact, it does all sorts of bad stuff. And so what it's doing is posting by default. That's the default submit action, is to do a post. This is leftover from the early days when that was a good thing. Most of the time these days, we don't want that to happen, so we have to automatically turn it off. So here's our first bit of code in XHTML. So we want to listen. We want to listen for that submit event. And the submit event, and this is another place where people get hung up sometimes. Submit event is thrown by the form itself, not from the submit button. Because the form is the stuff that has all the information in it that we want to see. So we're going to listen on the form. And we learn a lot of ways to do querying. Query selector all, select by class and all that stuff. I almost never ever use those. I pretty much always use the get element by ID for some philosophical reasons. Pretty much my philosophy, and this is not necessarily 100% industry standard, but a best practice that some people follow. In your HTML, I tend to make a pretty clear separation of classes being for styling only, and IDs being for hooking into JavaScript only. There are exceptions. It's not a hard and fast unbreakable rule. There are cases where you would want to select, all by a class or whatever. Most cases I find I'm selecting one thing by ID. So that's what I default to. And conversely, I never, if I can help it, ever make CSS rules that target IDs. That's a more generally accepted best practice to not do that. I've definitely seen it in the real world where people do otherwise, and there's conversations about that. But yeah, so you'll always see me styling only with classes, JavaScript only with IDs. That said, here's our form that we want to do stuff with. Create task form. So since we've got our defer all set up, I can just say document get element by ID, and that's our thing. And again, when starting out, I tend to be more, even like if it's something I've done a million times, which this is, just to make sure every little bit and piece is done. Get element by ID is just a function. Function just returns an element, and so I can console log that just to make sure that I'm selecting the thing I think I'm going to select. Let's go back to our page. Nope. Let's do this. Great. And in fact, I am selecting the thing I want. Now I'm more confident that I'm able to select things, so I'm just going to move forward with that with fewer console logs. Great. So I'm going to add an event listener on here. That event listener is going to be my submit. And now I can give that a function. I could do it inline here, and that's a totally fine choice. I tend to like writing, well, that's not true, might be lying. In this case, I'm going to make it a function. And one of the ways I tend to do it is write the functions here as if they already exist and fill them in later. And you'll see me do that a lot. So I'm going to say, call it handle submit for now. So handle submit is going to be the function. We could also use an arrow function there if we want, or any other kind of function in there. one of the things you'll come to learn, I'm also a big stickler about semantic naming, naming your variables and functions precisely, so that when someone else on your team or you a couple months later come back and look at it, it's easy to see what that thing is or what it does without having to look at other code. Right now, handle submit is accurate because I don't really know what we're doing. We're just handling the submit button. As we go forward, I might come back and change that to be something else. So let's write our function. Handle submit. This is an event listener, so it's going to take an event. And I just say E instead of event because I wind up writing a lot of event listeners. So our immediate problem was that post. What we want to do is prevent default on that first one, and that should at least keep us from posting. Create new task, great. And in fact, if we want to in here, submit, we know that's working. Fantastic. So we're able to click the button, just like the README asks. Last task, expect to see the task string that I provided appear in the DOM after the submit button has been activated or clicked, I guess. So this is our to-dos div. We can see it in the index. It is conveniently listed as tasks with an ID there. There's an unordered list. So here's where what I'm going to do might diverge from what you're doing already. Suspense. I'm going to do it the way that you've probably seen already. And then I'm going to do it a different way that will serve you way better going forward. So, and also, I'm also going to be more interjecting more philosophy than probably other mediums. Especially when you already know how to do a thing. I like to talk more about the thing than how to do it. In this case, I'm going to do it the simplest way possible. Something that I will say often is my 3 rules of programming. There's actually 4. 3 rules of programming are make it work, which means do the simplest thing to get it done. Make it pretty, which I need to rename. It just means readable or easily understandable. And then number 3, make it efficient. If you're worrying about like how tight your loop is or whether a function is too fast or slow, that should be the last thing you're worrying about. We're already using JavaScript, which is a relatively slow language. So number 1 rule, rule 1, make it work. So I'm going to do the simplest thing that makes this work. And since we're working with code instead of marble or oak, we can change our stuff pretty easily. And so we can refactor as we go along really nicely. So that said, simplest way to do this. So I need 2 things here. I need to get the information from the text field, and I need to smack it on here. Great. First one is going to be easy because it's attached to the submit action, because the submit event, the target, which is the thing that threw the event. The thing that threw the event is the form itself, and the form has all the stuff that we need on it. In this case, new task description. Great. I have thoughts about this, but we'll get to it later. Cool. So we know we're submitting correctly. First, we want to do is get our text. So our task, we'll say task. I want to call it task description, and we'll see why later. Task description is going to grab the text from that. So we need our event. We need the target of the event. And now we're going to look at the ID, which is that. I would not use this ID in a real app because I would like to just use a string here with dot. Since it has dashes in it, I need to target it with, or select it with, address it by square bracket method here with strings. That's fine. A couple extra characters never hurt anyone. So here's my target. There's the element. That's the input form, and we don't actually want the input element. We want the value from that. And again, as we're being a little bit extra cautious here, I'm going to go ahead and see what that is. Did I get it? I did. Great. Now I can do what I like with this. And what I like is putting things in unordered lists. So gonna grab that, gonna create a new thing, gonna put it on the thing. Easy peasy. So here's my list. Task list. I'm going to get element by ID, and that was tasks, I believe. And in fact, we're going to be using this a bunch. I try not to refactor ahead of time too much, but I know we're probably going to be using this often. So I'm going to bump it up to the top, the very top. So I know we're going to be using it just to keep it available up there. Since it's in the scope of our file here, it's going to be accessible to all the functions, and we don't have to reselect it every time. Which is rule 3, which whatever. Cool. So we've got the task list. Now we need to create a new task. And so we're going to do that. We're going to say const new task, say, and we're going to create that element. We can do document create element. Totally works. Create element is a method on any DOM node, any DOM element of which document is the root. If we wanted to get a little bit more precise with it, we could say task list create element. But sometimes that tricks my brain into thinking that I was going to add it as well since I'm creating on it. So I tend to stick with document create element. And we want a new list item. Fantastic. Another top tip, not command, option, nope, not that either. Option Shift F, Option Shift F will auto format your code for you. I tend to do that compulsively just to keep it looking consistent. And if there's any syntax errors, it'll complain. So extra suspenders there. Cool. So we've got our new task. I'm sure you've been shown several ways to add text to a element. We can do an inner HTML, we can do inner text, we can do text content. Unless you're specifically doing HTML, it really doesn't matter which one you use. I'm 50-50. There are very, very subtle differences that if you need to worry about them, you can look them up. In our cases, you almost never will need to worry about them. So I'm going to say, which one am I going to use this time? Who knows? I'm going to say text content. Great. Text content. And I'm going to set that to our task description. Great. Format. And then our last task here is to append that new task. Again, you can do append or append child. Append is a little bit more flexible and it's fewer characters to type. So that's what I wind up using most of the time. So I'm just going to append that. I'm going to append the new task node, format that. Great. And get element by ID is not defined. Tell me more about that. Oh, yep. You know why? Why do it on document? Yeah, prettier, definitely. I think the auto formatter is using prettier under the hood. So that's nice. And the nice thing is you can swap out whichever prettier formatter you want, beautify or whatever. I like to not think about it too much. Great. New tasks going in. There we go. And so that is the basic, most easiest way to do that, I think. Yeah, great. Forms, great. We talked about all that. Things, stretch. Cool. So 20 minutes, not bad, 25. So before we move on to the stretch goals, any questions about anything that we've done here already, from the most basic to anything? Or questions about the choices that I made?
What was, so for the Lite server, what was your install? I have npm-i.
Yeah, so you can do npm I or install -g for global, and then and that will make it globally available. And you could also do npx Lite server, and that will also run it without necessarily installing it. Takes a second, but 6 to 1.
So now that's installed globally on my machine. I have access to it in
Yep.
any directory.
Yeah.
That'll be okay.
Yeah.
And then how are you running that server again? Because the amount of times I am saving and refreshing,
Oh
I
yeah.
wish I had that number.
Yeah. So once it's installed, you can just install it with, or just run it with Lite server. Actually, let me close out of this one. And so I have it installed. And then when I run Lite server, it just pops it up and pops it in there. And you just have to make sure to run it in the directory that has your index.html in it.
Can you go over what Lite server is again?
That is
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Lite server is just a little super basic web server. A web server is just a program that runs on your computer or somewhere else that usually looks at a directory of files and listens for requests. So we can actually see all the requests that we're getting here. And Lite server specifically starts a server in a directory and serves the files that are in that directory through requests. So if we wanted to, we could, ask for, let's see, license MD. That should, yeah. So that'll bring up anything that's in that directory. If it's an HTML file, your browser will render it. But the cool thing that it does is that when you change a file, it automatically refreshes the page. So you don't have to save and reload it every time. Saves, half a second here and there, but you're gonna be doing this a million times, and that's 500,000 seconds. Did that answer?
Yeah, thank you. And is that different than setting your preferences to like autosave?
Yeah, so that's the server part, and then the preferences part. That's just for VS Code, whether you're doing web stuff or editing text files or whatever else. So there's a bunch of different things, and I hit Command, comma to open up preferences here.
Okay.
And then you can set it to, it'll save every 500 milliseconds or whenever you change the window. I like on focus change just because it's the most auto-savey for me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for asking.
Sorry.
Okay.
So
Never apologize.
when you save now with the Lite server running, it actually posts, it refreshes the page and then takes all the information from those files and then sends it back to the browser.
Yeah. So
Now-
basically what it does is there's a persistent socket connection open, and the server watches your file system for file changes. And anytime a file changes, it sends a message to the browser and says, "Hey, files changed, reload." And then it just automatically, it's just like hitting the reload button, just does a reload on the page.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. The combination of this saves me. I mean, again, it feels like almost no time individually, but it definitely adds up over the course of your life. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for asking for clarification there. Other questions?
What was it that you pressed in order to clean up the formatting and check for like the syntax?
That is, that is Option Shift F. And I believe that is automatically set up these days when you install VS Code. So if Option Shift F doesn't work for you, I would poke around in the preferences to see if there's any key binding that's missing, but it should be set up by default.
I went into extensions and then downloaded Prettier, and just like how the Lite server refreshes the browser, whenever I save my document, it does the formatting. It actually like makes it pretty every time I save.
Yeah, you can set it to like do it when you change the file at all if you want to. I don't have that turned on just because sometimes I'm a little bit particular about certain formatting. I'm like, I'm not going to prettify this, but yeah, if you want to prettify it all the time, that is an amazing way to do it. Super for it. Other questions? Cool. And if anything comes up, of course, feel free to interrupt. Sweet. Act 2, stretch deliverables. So there's a lot of these. Question: Would I think delete function is a good start. Is there any other one of these that you specifically want to see? I know you asked about the drop down yesterday. Anything else? Cool.
The delete one was one that was reviewed in one of the videos, like that Nick's did in lecture. So I feel like we got that one down. But then yeah, the drop down one
Yeah.
a bunch of headaches. And then I personally haven't.
Question for you, I guess. I didn't see that part. So can you just give me like the super high level overview of how the delete would work in this case?
Of how, okay. What had been reviewed was we created a function to delete the task that you created. And we did it where the function passed like an event, and then we did like e.target.parent node.remove, which targeted the, like the parent node of like what you input.
Yeah.
And just call .remove on it. And then you could go into your function where you're building the, or where do you have it called? Handle submit, I think.
Yeah.
So
when we're
and then you would put like the little X button that we created, add an event listener that every time that X is clicked, it calls that delete new task.
Yeah. Cool. And that's exactly the way I would expect this version of that to work. And that works. Rule 1 works, satisfies that condition. As we add more things like the drop down, editing, how would you, so question for you or anyone else who wants to jump in, say we wanted to edit the task in that similar way, or I guess I'll just talk through it instead of asking, or no, I'll ask, how do you, like, again, like even higher overview, you have the edit button hooked up, you have a function. In that function, how would you want to edit that task?
I'm not sure I know exactly what you're asking me.
Yeah. So let me talk through it a little bit then.
Okay.
So, and again, this is kind of like a big philosophical divide that you'll find pretty much every working developer on one side of. So just take a step back. You'll hear about model view controller stuff later on. It's a pattern, software pattern that basically says software has 3 big chunks to it. It has a model, which is a fancy way of saying like this is your data that we're going to be working with. It has a view, which is how we're, one or more ways to look at that data, and then controllers. And basically the controllers take input from the view and they change the model. And when the model updates, it updates the view. And you'll hear all about that later on. So in our case, our HTML is the view, right? Our HTML is showing us the data that we have. So in this case, where, say we implemented that delete button where it does the parent remove and all that stuff. In that case, where is our data stored? Or where's the list of tasks stored?
In the DOM?
In the DOM.
The DOM, yeah.
Oh. Yeah, and that is, when you're starting off, the most intuitive place to put that. We have HTML in there. We want to delete, change the HTML. We'll just do it in place there. As we add more functionality, deleting, editing, adding, priority stuff, that becomes more and more onerous. Even something simple like a like button, right? A like has like a little heart and a number. And when we want to update that, we click it, we have to go to this other, piece of text in the DOM, change it from text to a number, update that number and put it back in. And then, in a real team, we might have JavaScript developers and, HTML designers or whatever. And if we have our functionality so tightly tied to the structure of that, we're going to have a bad day pretty soon. Even in the case of the delete function that we described here, right now, we're just creating a list item with the task, right? Say we add a delete button and a drop down and stuff, and we're like, oh, maybe inside that list item we want to put some, a span or group them in some way. As soon as we take that list item, not the direct parent of the or direct child of the list, that button is going to start removing other stuff. It might like just remove the text and not the delete button. So we want a way to store our data in a way that's independent of the way it's displayed. Short version, keeping your data in the DOM is going to cause you a lot of trouble, like almost immediately. So before we move forward and hook up delete buttons and stuff, I'm going to show you a way to avoid that. And different people have different ways of doing this. In phase 2, when we get to React, you will see this. They have something called state that handles all this automatically for us. Since we're just grubbing around in vanilla JavaScript, we have to build it ourselves. So the core functionality of this is a to-do list. And so we want to think about what is our data, right? Our data, our main chunk of data is a list of tasks. And right now it's just list items in HTML with text. So if we want to represent that in JavaScript, we might say, put it down here. I'm going to say, const task list. And we know it's a list, so let's make it an array. Why is that red? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Let's call it tasks. So our tasks is just an array. Right now we're storing them as strings, so our tasks, would look like a bunch of strings. So let's start off with that, and we'll expand as we go on. So wash chickens, replace roof. Great. So we have a couple tasks. Shine socks. So here's our tasks. So we're going to think about what we want to do when we load the page first. And if we already have a list of tasks when we load the page, we'd like to display those tasks. So let's take a look at the tasks. Tasks are a list of strings. So I'm going to break this down into 2 functions, I think, right? First function is going to be, we'll call it, I'm going to call it render tasks, because we're rendering the tasks to the page. You can call it display tasks or show tasks or whatever makes sense to you. I'm going to call it render tasks. Great. And I don't want to assume any global variables on this necessarily. I don't think that's true right now. That's true right now. So I'm going to take in a variable. This variable is named the same as the variable up top, which is ethically dubious, I think, is what it's called a shadow declaration. And it can get confusing if you do it too much. Render test. I'm going to still use header. All it means is that when I refer to tasks in here, it overshadows, it eclipses the tasks outside. So anything that you pass in here is going to be tasks. And we'll worry about that. Or let me name it something else for simplicities. I'm going to call this task list element. Task list ul. Nope. Task list element. And then this can be task list. That's what it is. And then in here, we're taking tasks. Okay. Whew. Refactoring. Great. So cool. So this is our task lists, our list of tasks. And we want to put those on our page. So I feel like we want to render each task out. So I'm going to say, all I'm going to put in here for now is tasks. I'm going to do for each. Nope, for each. I'm going to say task. Render task. And I'll write another function that's called render task. Since I'm just passing this thing in here, for each is a higher order function. It takes a function as an argument and does that with each element. So I'm just going to pass in my function that doesn't exist yet. So I'm going to say, and it's kind of easier to read and understand in English. For each task, we're going to render the task. Cool. So now we just need to write that function. Task, great. And here's where we've already written a lot of this code already, right? We have, so we're assuming the task right now is a string, so that's going to be our task description. We have our task list element up here. I think for my own comfort, I'm going to actually move this back into the function because, you know, rule 3 is in place 3 for a reason. It takes a microsecond longer to reselect it every time, but computer time is cheap, programmer time is expensive. And so anything that's why rule 2 is rule 2 instead of 3. Anything that can make your understanding easier and able to reason about it easier is worth doing. And for me, putting the task list, the thing that we're going to be operating on, closer to what we're doing with it is going to make it easier to think about. Because if this gets longer, I don't have to scroll back up to the top and be like, wait, what was that element? If it's right here, I can just be like, cool, I know what that is. So now this is all just this stuff again, right? We have our task and we want to do a new line. We want to, I'm just going to copy paste it right now. I don't recommend copy pasting all the time, but here we go. I'm going to create our new task. That's going to be the list element. I'm going to call it new task element just for consistency. Our new task element is that I'm going to set the context to the task description, which right now is documented, which is going to be our task right now, right? Because our tasks are just strings. And then task list element, I'm going to append our new task element. Format a little bit. Naming things. I think this is about as long as a name that I like. I try to be as descriptive as possible without being unwieldy. In a real application, I might refactor those names a little bit, but for clarity, I'm going to call them that for now. Cool. So assuming everything works, which we should never do, but for the moment, we'll assume that this does work the same. So we have a function that's going to render all the tasks. Great. And so I think when the page loads, we can just call render tasks with our task list. And in theory, I think that's going to add all our tasks to the list when we load the page. Hey, and it did. Amazing. It worked the first time. So again, and this is happening when we load the page. So we're assuming that we have a list of tasks right now just so we can see how it works. We will start off with no tasks soon. So now we have a lot more flexibility. Since our data is separated from the display of the data, we can play with our data as much as possible And then when we are done, we just render that data to the page. And so we don't need to worry about pulling data from the DOM. Who knows what, I mean, if someone adds a bold tag around something, that could screw everything up, right? So we always want that flow to be one way, and this is going to serve you well next phase too. We always want that flow to be from the model to our view. So we want to be able to change our data. When the data changes, we want to update that view. Does that part make sense so far? Any questions about that kind of thinking?
You are doing this very differently than you were following the video.
Yep, absolutely.
And it does make a lot of sense. And I'm trying to follow along with my code here.
Yeah.
And basically, when you're calling render tasks on line 7 in task list, that is calling the line 13 render task function.
Yep.
And that's taking in, that's going to return task.for each. So tasks is.
So it's actually not returning anything. It's just doing that, right?
Okay. For each doesn't have a return.
Yeah.
Tasks. So, and then you're passing the task list into that. So for each index on task list, you are render task.
Yeah.
And then that is calling render task on each element in that array.
Yeah.
And that's where we're appending it to. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And right now they're all strings. So we're just adding that stuff in.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, that's perfect.
But a question.
Yeah.
So right now, if we were to enter something in that submit, like the input bar and click submit.
Yep.
Right now, that doesn't.
Nothing's happening right now.
Okay, it's not adding. Okay. Okay.
But now we've just made this so much easier for ourselves, right? We can grab our task description, just like we did before. The target, what was it called again? Something long and unwieldy. New task description. Task description, value. And we can just take that and append it to the task list. And now we've updated our data, and all we need to say is render the tasks again. Right now it's going to do something unexpected, but the flow here is what we're looking for, right? We're going to take that input from the view, right? We're getting that data from that form field. We're updating our data, and then we're going to update our view with that. What's going to happen here that we don't necessarily want? Any ideas?
Is it going to modify the original array?
Well, we are modifying the original array. Yeah, that's what we want to do, right? So that task list will then contain our new task. What's going to happen that we don't want here on the view? Any ideas?
You're going to get all of the other options too, right?
Exactly. Yep. 100%. So easy enough to fix. We just say we're going to take our task list here, and this might be an argument for putting in a global again, but we're going to clear it out before we render it to it. And that's something you'll always see in this render tasks or in this kind of pattern. when we render out a thing to this, when we paint our new canvas, we need a clear canvas first. So there are several ways to empty out an element. Some are more efficient than others. I will almost always do it the dirty garbage way, and just set the inner HTML to nothing. That will clear it out for sure. So anything that's inside that element is going to be replaced with nothing. And now that we have our empty list, we can render all the tasks into it now. And so this should look nothing, because we fixed it. Now that does what we want. The question I often get is, isn't that terribly inefficient? The answer here is kind of, but it doesn't matter. Again, efficiency is rule 3. It's at the end. This strategy is going to make it way easier for you to add features as a developer. So rule 2 beats that. And again, if we're using JavaScript, speed is not really something we should be worried about until it's too late. React, Angular, Vue, most major frameworks use a system like this internally. They do a lot more like smart caching and shadow DOM and all sorts of very clever things to make it a lot more efficient. You'll definitely see like React rendering out a list of 1,000 things, and anytime you update a value, it re-renders the whole thing, which sounds like a nightmare, but actually works beautifully. In this case, we're running out a to-do list with a few items in it, so efficiency is 0 of concern for us right now. So cool. We've so this is the goal in refactoring, right? To make it behave exactly the same, have exactly the same functionality, just with better insights, which is kind of what we've done here. So now that we've got this set up, any more questions about this strategy? So I'm gonna mess with it a little bit more as we go forward. I don't think this is on the list, but an easy win I'd like to add here is when we submit, and since we have our handle submit here, I just want to clear out our input. And so I'm gonna just grab that here. Again, we could assign that to a constant if we like. Actually, nope, I don't want that. I want eTarget. And again, there's a lot of ways to clear out a form. I will almost always default to clearing out the individual values, which is not a great idea, probably. But now just doing a reset on the form should clear out anything that's in the form, which is what we want. So now we can type stuff in again without having to delete it. So low-hanging fruit. Oh, something just fell down.
So I did it differently, but the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was able to make an empty array and then create a function add task to array. And then inside of the form submit event button, I call add to array and pass the to do or the value of the submit into that function.
So you kind of then these lines out and do its own function.
And then push it into the array with the add to array function or whatever I named it.
And that works.
It did, yeah.
Yeah, done. Yeah, and this is again in programming, as long as it works, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's just easier and harder ways, and those are subjective for the developer or team. That's why rule 1 is rule 1. If it works, awesome. If it works for you, even better. So however you get to the goal, a lot of people will have a lot of opinions about your code. The only thing that matters is if it works the way you want and you can understand it. Cool. Other questions? All right, let's mess this up a little bit more. How are we doing on time? Oh, y'all good going a little bit over the hour so we can get to the other stuff? Awesome. Cool. So first refactor, not going to change the behavior, just going to change what it looks like under the hood. We're going to want to add functionality, including priorities. So again, a couple of different ways we do this. We could create a parallel array that has priorities, store it somewhere else. But since JavaScript is an object-oriented language, objects are a thing that we like to use for things. So I'm going to go ahead and change all of these strings into objects. So instead of having an array of strings, I'm going to have an array of task objects. And this opens up a whole new world for us. Our task is more conceptually closer to what it is, and we can manipulate it better. So I'm going to go ahead and change all these to description and spell description right. Description. Wow, brain. Okay, let's try it again. Description. Perfect. Fantastic. And we'll add a priority to it. I'm not going to use it yet. Everything's priority 1. That job. Cool. And we'll just paste there. I'd normally do this with a find and replace with a regex because it's super cool, but that's more explaining. Awesome. And I made a mistake there, so my formatter doesn't work. Fantastic. So now to make this work, we need to make one little tweak. We still have our task description down here. We want to create a new object with a priority 1. So now every new task we create is going to have a new object created for it. And we don't need to change render tasks because render tasks is just calling render task. We just need to do render task. And that just means this task here is an actual task object. That's an actual task instead of a string. And so here we just want to change this to task description. Minor change, a little bit of tweaking in a bunch of places can get hairy if your code is too big. Let's verify that this still works the same. Looks all right to me. Cool. So again, refactor, make it work exactly the same. Hopefully make it a little bit easier to work with. Let's go for a nicely formatted one here. Stretch deliverables. So our delete function. Cool. So in our new scheme of things, instead of removing stuff directly from the DOM, what's our strategy going to be for deleting tasks?
Removing them from the array.
We just remove from the array, re-render, and we're all good. So let's see what that looks like. So we want to update our render task, I guess. And let's see, here's our new task element. I'm going to, how do I want to do this? A button, a clicky thing. Let's make a button. Why not? So here's our new task element. I'm going to create a new button. How about that? Element button. Our delete button content is going to be sweet X. Uppercase because it's important. Great. And then we're just going to append that button to the list element. Cool. And that shouldn't do anything now except for show up and look sweet. Awesome. Good enough for now. Cool. And now we need to add behavior to that button. So we're going to do a click listener on it. You can say, it doesn't matter where we do it. I'm going to do it here. And this time I am going to do an inline function. And right now, I'm just going to console log. deleting. So when I click it, it should log that we want to delete that task. Cool. Sweet. So now we need to figure out how we're removing this from the list. Good question. So there's a few ways to do this, right? We know what the element description and priority is. We don't know the index of it right now. So again, several ways we can do things here. We could pass in the index in our for each, and then do like a splice on the array. That'll work. It's a little bit messy and not it clouds up our for each a little bit. Makes it a little bit less clear to the casual reader what's happening. Also, we could go through the list, see which one has that description. If for some reason we have the same description on two of them, we're not going to like that. So I'm going to add another attribute to our object here. And I'm just going to give it a unique ID each time. Make those 2 and 3. And those are just the ones in there. I need to create the IDs in here as well. We could set up an incrementer, a lot of different ways. Right now, I'm just going to give it a random number. This is a terrible way to do it. Don't do it. Math random. Great. This is going to be a random number between 1 and 0. It's going to be disgusting. Let's make it a string. 2 string. So this is going to give new ones a random ID. That's a terrible way to do it. Don't do it that way. And I think if we, oh, that's not going to. Okay. But basically right now for our purposes, we just want an ID that's unique for each one. This is not guaranteed to be unique, but as long as we're not doing it for a million years, it should be. Cool. So now we have a unique thing to look at. And again, this should not change anything, any functionality, should all work great. So we want to remove, so now we know in our delete task here, or our delete button, we know that we want to delete the current task here. So I'm going to change, right now this is a constant. I'm going to change this to a let variable, which means that we can change it. Again, this is one way to do it, but I'd also like to introduce this thing to you, which definitely be using more in the future. Functional programming is a thing. I can recommend some amazing videos on it right now in the limited time that we have. Map is a great function to use on arrays. Filter is a great function to use on arrays. Reduce is my favorite. It's a chainsaw. So basically what we want to do here is when we delete something, we want to take the task that we have, look at its ID, and remove that task from the task list. That's one way of thinking of it. Another way of thinking of it might be to take the task that we have, look at its ID, and replace the task list with a new list that does not have that ID in it. I think that's the way I'm going to go. Again, to old programmer brain feels terribly inefficient to someone who works in C or whatever. This is how we do things sometimes. So I'm going to use filter on this. And so I'm going to separate that out just a little bit so it's clearer to see. And I'm going to say, I'm working on a global now. Task list is global. We'll deal with it. task list is going to equal our task list. And I'm going to filter it. And filter is a higher order function that a higher order method that runs on an array that says, take a function, run this function on each item of the array, and return a new item for, return a new array for that contains every item that this function is true for. So here's my element. So the thing that I want to be true is that the element is going to be each task in the task list. The thing I want to be true is that the element ID does not equal task ID. Great. So we're taking the task list and we're saying only replace it with a new array that only includes the IDs that don't match the thing that we're deleting. And then once we've cleared out that task list, hey, we can do render tasks again with task list. Sometimes when I do this, I'll just have a render task run off a task list automatically and not pass it in every time. It's a choice. This time I feel like passing it in. So again, since we have our data separated, we are manipulating our data by replacing it with a list that doesn't have this task in it and just re-rendering it. This should work. Am I lying? Let's find out. I don't want to replace the roof. That costs too much. Hey, it does that. Cool. So it looks like our thing works. Hooray. So this is a functional way to do it. Again, other ways might be to splice the lists, pull elements out otherwise. Another way, another nice way to do it. This works great. First, before I change things, I have a better way to do it even. It's thought of. Questions about this way. This is probably new stuff for you. Cool. Yeah, and functional programming can twist your mind a little bit. Remind me to post that video, Brian. I'm happy to talk about this at length in the future. But another thing that might be nice to have is a list of completed tasks, which makes this even easier, I think. So I'm going to go back and change this to a const, which means we're not replacing the list. And instead of filtering it out, I'm going to add to each of these done. False. And so now, again, when we create a new one, I have to make sure to add that new property to it. Cool. So now I'm just going to set done to true. Fantastic. I'm going to take this out because we don't need it anymore. I use console logs so much in debugging. A lot of people like debuggers, but I always have to be assiduous about removing them when they're not useful anymore. So this should not work right now because we're just changing. And actually, I think we can actually see task list here. Look at that. Oh, we can actually look at our task list here and see that done false, done false, done false. Change this here. Should be able to see done is true. Yes. Now we just need to figure out how to filter out the ones. Oh, the secret word. Filter out the ones that are not done when we're displaying them. Again, many ways to do that here. We can check for it in render task. I'm going to use good old filter again. I'm going to do it on tasks in render tasks. I'm just going to filter out the ones that are not done. So this is saying, take the task list, give us a new list that only includes the ones where done is false. And now if I set one to done, it will not display it, but it still exists in our list, which is really nice because we could undo that or display a list of completed tasks. Another way to do it. Again, there's a million ways to do everything in programming. Programmers are designers. Every choice we make is a design choice that affects us and our companions. I don't think I've done it this way before in a demo. I think I'm gonna leave it this way. I like this way. And again, this will reflect a lot of stuff you'll see going forward, and especially a lot of stuff in phase 2. Sort of a sneak preview. But using this general pattern is going to save you so much time in the long run. It's a little bit more work up front, but as you add functionality, it's going to make things so much easier. Take like 15 more minutes to add the priority thing. Questions about this before we move on? And I'll definitely be sharing this code later on, so you can examine it at your leisure and ask more questions later on. Awesome. Let's take a look at, and see. So just looking at this, right? If we want to edit the tasks, we just edit the item in the array and re-render. If we want to add more fields, we just add those to the object and do what we like. Right now, we're going to add a dropdown that has priority. We already put priority in there. Sweet. And so high, medium, low. So let's change these all to medium. How about this? If you select text and do Command D, boom, 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 that will multi-select, and you can say medium. So you can edit a bunch of things at once. Super mind-blowy when you get used to it. So now all of our tasks are medium priority. So we want to do a red, blue, green thing here. Let's do that. I'm a little bit scared to look at their their CSS. Where is it? Where's our CSS style? Yeah, look. Nope, don't like that. Okay, I'm not going to change that right now, but it hurts my heart. Oh, it hurts my heart so much. Cool. I'm going to add some classes for styling, because we should be using classes for styling. I'm going to just call them high priority. Background color is red. We're just going to say, if you select stuff and then do shift option, you can copy. We're going to high, medium, make that yellow. And low is going to be green, we said. Cool. And I'm just going to check out how that looks by, we can do that right now. Since it has priority medium, when we create our task, let's, in our new task element, let's add a class to it. Again, several ways to do it. I'm going to do class list, add, and I'm going to add, you know what, instead of priority, I'm just going to say high, medium, and low. And this is a little dicey. I wouldn't do this in a real project, but I'm just going to add the class of the task priority. Nope, priority. So it should add that class to it. That makes me a little nervous. Programmatic CSS is a whole other thing that people have a lot of opinions about. For now, this should make everything yellow. It made everything yellow. So we have a way to display our classes, or display our priorities. Now let's make a way to select our priorities. And here we want to add another dropdown, I guess. So let's add it. We'll add it after the delete button. Priority dropdown. Priority select. How about that? And that's going to be element. That's going to be a select, right? Yeah, let's do this. So we have that here. So I'm going to show you another dirty trick that people might yell at you for, but I don't care. So we've been creating elements and adding their stuff and appending them and all that, which is fine. We can also directly add to the inner HTML. So we can say priority select inner HTML equals low. So we just smacked some HTML in there. I'm going to add it down here. So in theory, so again, there's no reason we couldn't build these out by creating the option elements and appending them and setting their value and setting their inner text or text content. This works just as fine. People have opinions and there are very, very slight differences. For our purposes, rule one, right? We just want to get it done. So there's our dropdowns. And now we just need to hook up our functions to it. So we're going to add an event listener and we're going to add it to the select because the select is going to be the thing that throws our event. And what event are we listening for here?
Is it an option?
Option.
No.
Are you listening for change?
Listening for change. Yep. Always. So we're listening for change. So when the value of that changes, we want to update the associated task. I'm going to do an inline one again here, and that's going to be task priority equals event target value. And then we're just going to render our tasks again. Come on down here, buddy. I'm starting to get some smells off of this. I'm doing some similar things over and over again. I'm not going to refactor that out now, but this is getting, it's only 60 lines or so, but this is feeling a little long to me. So I'm always kind of on the lookout for things that smell like they could be refactored. In this case, longer term, I might want to, especially if we're going to be adding more things, I might want to make a function that takes takes a task and what we want changed and what we want to change to, and changes it, re-renders, because it seems like we're writing this stuff over and over again. Twice is acceptable. If I did it a third time, definitely refactor immediately. Assuming it works. It might not work. I'm like 95% sure here. Before we test it, I want to clarify two things, I guess, two subtle points. When we are talking about task inside this function, the reason I'm doing this as an inline function instead of another function is if I had another function outside there, I would need to explicitly pass task to it, which can get a little clunky. In this case, since we're in the scope of this function, this is, I don't know if you have learned about closures, fancy word for saying data inside of a scope can still be accessed by things created inside that scope, even after that scope is gone. So our function render task is the scope of task that has that available in that function. Since we're creating an event handler that uses that data, it keeps a reference to that data and attaching to something that persists, that task is going to, that task piece of data is going to keep living on. And that's why we can use task in functions that will theoretically not, they kind of look like they're not going to be around, but they are. So this is using a thing called a closure, is why I'm doing it inline. And I think it feels intuitive to use and feels less intuitive to think about, like thinking about walking too much. You're like, I'm just falling, oh no. At the beginning, you can just use it like this and not worry about the inner functionalities. It's an amazing tool. I use it all the time in my own work. Closures are fucking lit. Second, I'm altering the task object. And I know you've learned about reference variables versus primitives. I can change task, and the task that's in the task list changes. And that's because arrays and objects are reference types. The thing that is stored in the variable here is not the actual array, right? It's the address of the array. It's the reference of the array. So you can think of it as a house address, right? These things are in this house. And so when I say, the wash the chickens task is in the list, that is also just the address of that. So when I change task done or task priority, this is, I'm working on the reference to that object. So it's actually changing the object in the list without having to change the whole list. This is both an amazingly good thing, as we see here, can also be amazingly dangerous if you're not aware of it, and you're changing your data without realizing it. Again, one of those things that feels easy to use is harder to think about. I encourage you to think about it on your own time, in your leisure time when you're dreaming about it. So those are the two little finer details I wanted to talk about there. And I'm happy to talk about those at length later. But for now, let's see if the thing that I wrote actually works. Relatively confident. Let's find out. Oh, so we will make that work. Let's see. Medium, medium high, red, green, low. Aha. So the thing that's happening here is that we're not setting the list, the drop down to the value of the thing. So it's always going to be on low, which is going to cause a problem. So here's what we want to do. Since we've created this already, I can set the value of that to our current tasks priority. And this definitely 100% reflects something that you're going to see in React. So basically, when we are rendering out that dropdown, we want to make sure that the dropdown value reflects the value of the task, as well as the the things for that. So look at that. We got medium, we got low. Oh, that works now. High, medium, low, high. That all works. Let's delete those high ones. Shining socks sounds easy, so we're going to keep that. Cool. And again, styling aside, this works. We can make it prettier later on. Yeah, that's an hour and a half is a long time to listen to someone talk. So I think I'm going to leave this here and leave other stuff up to you. Main thing I want to underscore is this pattern, keeping your data separate from your view, is going to serve you immensely. So many people go so long without. I spent a really long time not doing that. It's not the right way to do it. It makes some things easier. So it's a tool, add it to your belt. When you feel like it's a good thing to use it. If there's something, you don't have to do it for every little thing. If there's a simple thing that doesn't require this pattern, don't worry about it. You saw me code this from scratch, right? My general philosophy is do something easy that works first, then think about it a little bit and see if you can, rule to it a little bit. So yeah, don't worry about getting everything perfect the first time through. Code challenge especially. Rule one, all up in that. You want to make sure it works first, even if it is ugly, and then you can go through and make it a little bit prettier or easier first. If you find that something might require refactoring to make it possible to do it in 90 minutes or 2 hours or how long, sometimes refactoring is your friend, but none of these are hard and fast rules or the right way to do it. These are different choices you can make. everyone has their own style. Definitely people would do this differently than I would. This is different than I did it last time I did this. I'm probably going to do it completely different next time. But basic principles, are things that stick around a lot. That was a lot of talking. Floor open for any questions at all about any of this. Overwhelmed. I get it. For sure.
I had a question about the change event listener because I've never seen that before, but like,
Yeah.
so just it looks, is it, so it's attached to the form?
Yeah, it's
Then-
attached to the form input element. In this case, is a dropdown.
Okay. Or yeah, it's attached to the select.
Yeah.
And then the event recognizes whenever the value is changed.
Yeah. So the element, and it doesn't have to be a dropdown, right? It can be checkboxes, radio buttons, text inputs, text fields, like color picker, anything that has a value that can change will, when it changes, throw an event and say, hey, I changed, anyone who's listening. And so we're going to listen for that and do something when it announces that it's changed.
Okay.
That answer what you're looking for?
And e.target is just grabbing the priority select.
Yeah. So the target of an event is always going to be the thing that threw the event. So since the drop down is the thing that's saying, hey, I changed, that's the thing that is the target of the event.
Okay.
If we were inventing events from scratch, I don't think target's the best name, but sender maybe. But it's been like this for 30 years now, so I guess this is what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Maybe not 30 years, a while. Awesome. Yeah, great question. Anything else I can clarify?
In response to when you enact the the event listener for change, can we go over like where, at what point did like we identify the colors changing?
Yeah. And this is a great, fantastic question. This is a great example of the separation of view and model, or view and data. So the colors that show up here, and in fact, the colors and what the dropdown looks like are kind of connected, right? The color here is determined by the class that's on the element, and we set that class when we are rendering or creating that element. So, and stop me anytime if I'm going down the wrong direction. So we have our data here. Our data for our object for each task has a priority, which is a string, low, medium, or high. Probably should be something else, but that's what it is for now. So our data knows its priority and doesn't care about how it's displayed. It could be a web page, could be an app, it could be sent to Alexa. Our data doesn't care how you're looking at it, but we care. So when we render our tasks, anytime we render our tasks, when we create a task, we're going to look at our data. Where so much code. Where did I put it? We're adding our class. So we've created our new task element, and looking at the code and not being able to find something immediately is definitely says that this is a candidate for refactoring. If a function takes up more than one screen, definitely start pulling stuff out. But yeah, so we've created our new task element. And so we're just going to add a class to it, which hooks up with our CSS. And all we're saying is look at the priority for our task object and set that class. So since the priority string matches up with the string that I'm using for the classes, that's easy. And since we're refreshing it every time, we don't need to take off the old one and put a new one on. We're creating a fresh new task element saying you are high, lower, medium priority class. And that class is telling the browser to show that color. Is that kind of what you're asking? Anything else in there that is not fully connected for you?
I think I'm gonna read it over
Okay,
top to bottom and maybe watch this up again, maybe. But
And
yeah.
feel free to ask on the channel or
time to
uh,
process.
I'm happy to talk about any of this at length. Yeah, before actually, one of the things here that I want to underscore that you're all going to immediately forget and never do, but I'm going to say it anyway because I have to. Classes, CSS semantics are super important to me. There's a reason I didn't call this red, yellow, and green, because I want the classes to describe the thing that's doing it. So this is high priority, medium priority, low priority. If our designer comes back tomorrow, or our client comes back tomorrow and says, "Hey, I need a different color scheme," high priority is going to be orange, medium is going to be red, low is going to be purple. We don't want to have to change the names of our classes. We just change the colors and the description. It's still high priority. We're just changing the way it looks. I'll harp on that plenty of times in the future, but and there are definitely like popular CSS frameworks, Tailwind, that you'll be using that are like, put the blue class on this, and that just is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. But people use it and people love it, so if it works for them, great. No wrong choices, only easier or harder, and in the long run, that's going to make their life harder. But it's easy to get running. Cool. Rant over. Last call for questions or anything. Kevin, go ahead.
I did have one question regarding the dot class list on line 57. Just to make sure I'm getting that correct, that dot class list is what's connecting that priority to the CSS file.
Yeah. So we're so class list, because elements can have more than one class. So class list is just a list of those classes, and we're just saying, take a look at the priority of the task, which in this case happens to match our classes, and add that as a class on that new element. So yeah, that's where we're kind of plugging that in.
Got it.
Is that a built-in Word class list, or is that something that you declared somewhere else?
Nope, that's built into HTML elements. Yeah, and we can see that your best friend is MDN. Anytime you want to do anything at all, this is like the canonical JavaScript resource, and they just reformatted stuff so it looks a little nicer. And you can find out, here's all the, we can look at our HTML element and look at all the things that you can do with HTML elements. Oh, golly. Okay. In your copious free time, you can just read through documentation. That's always a fun thing to do. Yeah, but if you are ever curious about how anything at all in JavaScript at all, or CSS or HTML works, MDN is your go-to place. That is the source, and it'll even tell you like, hey, these are the browsers that this works in. Internet Explorer, sorry. Yeah. No, to answer your question briefly, yes, that is built in. Anything else before we break?
Where did these recorded lectures save to?
Fantastic question. This is the first one I've done for this class. So I'm going to put it on YouTube. I'm going to post the link in the channel, usually as a response to the, hey, come and do this thing. And I also am going to create a playlist for this cohort that will have all of the videos for the cohort on it. So if you ever need to browse through them, they'll be there. And I'll post a link to that playlist at the top of the channel too, so y'all can find that.
And you said you were going to post the file, right?
Yeah. So I'll push this up to GitHub, and I will this time I'll post a link to the GitHub in the response to the thing in chat, and I'll also put it in the description of the video, so you can always find it there. And open secret, all of the videos for all of my other cohorts are also on YouTube. So you can definitely find them there too if you want to poke around. Awesome. This felt pretty good. How do y'all feel? Thumbs up, around, nervous giggles. Great. 45s. Awesome. Yeah. And again, this is not your last chance to engage with this. I'm around all the time. Feel free to ask questions on channel. If you have answer questions as well, but I'm always happy to talk more about any of the stuff. Cool. Well, thank you all. Let me get stop share. Hey, there's all your faces. Thank you all for showing up and asking questions and doing all this stuff. Yeah, wow, that's a long thing. I try to keep these to under an hour because I feel like anything over an hour is just inhumane, but here we are. My apologies. Cool, yeah, and then feel free to look at this at your leisure. I'll post it in those places, and yeah, I'll see y'all in a little bit. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, Mark.